Hi everybody, this is Toffee bringing you part 2 of my FE12 Maniac Mode 100% Growth LTC. We're entering the main campaign and we'll start by grabbing the DLC Bond Drop, Growth Drop, and Rainbow Potion. We've also unlocked access to Reclassing. Each of the units in our current army, except Chris, contributes one reclass slot of their base class line, which will also be true of every unit that will join us later in the campaign, with one exception. Plus we get one extra slot in every class. Since we have mixed male reclass, male units can freely reclass into either Set A or Set B classes. We give Marth the Growth Drop, which gives him a non-zero magic growth and pushes his HP growth over 100 and hence to 200. Chris will spend the entire rest of the run in either the Cavalier or Flyer lines, so he'll focus on using lances moving forward. We're joined by Aran, the Jagan, aka Irrelevant in 100% Growths, Garden, who will recruit one future character, but he can do this at base, and Draug, who exists. Luke, Marth, and Chris will soak up the combat EXP for now. Cecil was reclassed to Pegasus Knight, since we need one unit with wings for some of the things that we do. She flies over to that spot to grab the Hidden Bullion. Hidden items in this game don't have an RNG factor to them, they're simple range conditions. Marth comes under a lot of fire on this turn, and we avoided critting the enemies so that we could get multiple rounds of chip EXP against them. On turn 2, Marth visits the village to recruit Militia. Militia comes with C rank and staves, meaning she can use the Warp Staff at base, and will also have practically exclusive access to the Hammerne staff, making her an important and unique unit. For this run, we want her to promote for Chapter 9, and also want to pump her stats in general for Chapter 19. We also need a couple of B rank staffers later in the game to use the Again staff, and it turns out Militia can handle our Again needs all the way until Chapter 21, which is the only time we will need a second Again user. She is of course comically frail at base, so we will wall her off with our units. Aran was reclassed to General for the high base defense, making him not be targeted by the enemies on the first couple of maps until we assemble our primary combat units. The enemies near the boss have a linked AI where they'll only start moving if at least two of them see a unit in range, and Cecil flies there to get the ones near the back of the formation to see her as a juicier target and to walk down. With combat rigging, the higher weapon ranks of lances are usually rather superfluous, but getting to D lances is important to unlock javelin access. Getting to C rank lances gives a unit +1 attack with lances, and getting to A lances gives them +2 attack. But something to note is that these weapon level bonuses go away when you have weapon triangle disadvantage. Renan visits the only map armory we will go to all game to get us some javelins. This game has a rather infamously large cast of playable characters, and the gear that they bring and the drops from enemies will generally carry us through the entire game. Luke hits D lances there, and Chris starts engaging the boss. If Marth talks to Lawrence, he would self-destruct, but there's no room to do that at LTC pace, and we like him better as an EXP bag anyway. Something to note is that since Chris is reclassed to Cavalier, he no longer has a greater than 100% HP growth, but in exchange he does have a non-zero magic and resistance growth. This will be true when he goes Draco Knight as well. We wrap up to finish chapter 1 in 6 turns. Blood maps were all rock maps, but most of the main campaign consists of siege maps. Something you can see in the preparations menu is How's Everyone, which this run will not be using. How's Everyone for our purposes would let units grab free items from a pre-selected pool, or gain EXP up until 0.99, or temporary stat boost. We don't need it for any of our strategies. Foreshadowing the ludicrous number of units who will join us, as of chapter 2 we're already forced to start benching units. We'll be joined after preparations by Katreya, who will be our next physical combat unit. Being able to fly as an unpromoted unit and coming with competent bases will let her get to work at once. We will give her a Steel Lance and Rainbow Potion to use. The Rainbow Potion is a 77 use DLC item that, for a use, gives a unit +2 to all their non-HP combat stats for the entire chapter. It's much less important in a world with combat rigging, but we will still occasionally use it to reach stat benchmarks for convenience or AI manipulation. Marth first visits the nearby village to recruit Card, who exists. On the left, Draug and Cecile will be responsible for reaching and penning in the Lady Sword Thief. Militia misses a staff use on turn 1, which we could have set up by having a unit use an Angelic Robe on turn 1. Getting damaged by that hunter is the only combat Garden will get into for the whole run. Katreya recruits Warren as she finishes his friend off. Warren exists. There is some randomness in how the enemies move, and I did have to trial and error a bit to find seeds which would get them to move how I wanted to on the many different enemy phases. There really isn't all that much to talk about on these maps that are bounded by Mart's walking speed. I intentionally let Katreya get damaged on the earlier turns of this chapter to ensure that the enemies would lock onto her as much as possible. The boss and the other Draco Knights at the top of the map have a linked AI where they will all attack together if any of them are provoked. On Lunatic, there are a couple more Draco Knights with the boss. The Lady Sword is a powerful E-rank sword that only women can use. I don't believe we ever put it to use in this playthrough. Katria is the unit who will handle actually killing the Lady Sword Thief, because that way we avoid feeding filthy EXP thieves. We'll just go through the motions, and that'll be Chapter 2 completed in 6 turns. Alright, here's the big one. The chapter that stalled my progress on this run for several months on end. We were joined at the end of the previous chapter by Lind, who will be our next EXP target. We want to train up a second competent magical unit other than Militia, and Lind joins in time for this long chapter, making her a great pick for the job. Lind brings us the Nosferatu and Aura tomes. Nosferatu is an 8-might D-rank tome locked to women like the Lady Sword that replenishes the user's HP, and in a game with no weapon weight and no other significant restrictions, it is quite a powerful tool. Of course, combat rigging makes it much less necessary. Aura is the most powerful unforged tome in the game, and is also exclusive to women at B rank for everyone except Lind, who has special PRF access. Despite these strong credentials as a mage, Lind will actually spend most of her time unpromoted using staves, an idea that was pioneered in Lunatic LTCs. The idea is that there's only so much combat EXP to go around, so reducing the competition for it and instead having her farm staff EXP is more efficient. She starts at E rank in staves, but she will climb to D just during the course of this map, and she will eventually become a warper and our second again staff user later in the game. We gain access to the forge in chapter 1, but the only weapon we forge in the entire run is this Iron Lance, which we actually forge negative might onto for the sake of EXP routing. I should maybe talk about the monstrosity of a map that awaits us. In a full recruitment context, Marth needs to visit the village in the bottom left to recruit Bord, visit the village in the top right to recruit Julian, who in turn can recruit Mathis, and then Marth seizes the gate in the center. There is a bridge near the starting area, but we can only open it with the bridge key from the village in the south. It turns out that it is faster to have Marth ignore the bridge and just walk all the way around the top of the map to Julian's village, which causes a large part of this map to just be a walking simulator. Chris and Marth will be the units to go on the long march while the others will hang back. There is a ballista near the boss that can barely reach our units near the start, and we'll rely on it to farm staff uses. Lind and Militia don't get staff uses in on turn 1, which again could theoretically be achieved by having units use angelic robes. Up north, we got an important new unit, Pala. Pala comes with great base stats, and B Lances is a Pegasus Knight, and will be the last of our primary physical combat units. Since we have RNG control, we will have her kill all the reinforcement cavaliers from the north to farm that EXP, and pick off the thief going for Julian's village. Down south, Luke baited over the first group of Draconites, who have a linked AI to charge together if at least 2 of them are provoked, which also causes most of the Dracos over the mountains to start moving. Interestingly, in Maniac mode, there is one extra Draconite who is not present on Lunatic mode, a holdover from the FE3 Book 2 version of this map. Several of the units in this game are not present in FE3 Book 2, which streamlines some clears in that game, such as not having to get card in the previous map and being able to take a more direct route through this map. Luke crit killed one of the Dracos for convenience, and we have Luke and Katria split up all of the Dracos who attacked the starting area. On turn 2, Chris baited over 2 of the Dracos on the left, with the last one going for Marth. Chris has started ramming his stat cap, so we don't care about getting him past level 13 and instead want to focus EXP into Marth. We rolled up the Dracos who attacked Chris on bulk and underforged his lance to ensure he wouldn't kill them, so they could be fed to Marth. We couldn't have Chris use an iron sword, which is a weaker weapon, because of his C rank in swords causing his attack to actually go up by one crucial point. Chris capped his speed at level 13 and is just itching for a Master Seal. An underrated perk of 100% growths is guaranteeing HP level ups creating staff targets. Lind and Militia occasionally get free staff targets in each other as a result due to how long this map is. On turn 5, Marth reaches Bard's village. Bard exists. Marth was able to lose some squares on the earlier turns and still make it here, but he has to move his full move every single turn after this to reach Julian's village on time. North, the one remaining Draco will be fed to Pala. I think that Draco is supposed to only start moving if you visit the armory, which is what the behavior of the corresponding Draco in FE3 Book 2 was. The second set of Dracos on the right is linked to the Master Seal Draco, which is why they didn't charge on earlier turns. Marth hits Sea Swords, which will give him 1 extra attack, which will let him actually pull off the 2-round of the Master Seal Draco, since you'd think he'd be 1-shot otherwise. Over here, I kind of take advantage of the fact that I have combat rigging to leave Militia in a very bad position, where the Draco doubles and 1-rounds her. I think Lind would not have gotten doubled by that Draco, so I could have just retooled things so Lind was in range and then avoid that needless chance of death. If I had remembered at the time, I could have altered Pala's actions a little bit to ensure that she got 1 round of Chippy XP against this Draco Knight, but I didn't. Oh well. Now that we have our first promotion item, Chris will promote. As a promoted male unit, he gains access to the Draco Knight class and a little extra lance rank in both Paladin and Draco Knight, letting him use javelins at last. For the next few turns, it'll just be a staff farm and walking simulator. Something I didn't acknowledge earlier were the support conversations and preps. Supports build by being deployed on the same map, and the conversations are based on the same counter. Getting the 3rd tier support conversations between units that have one will give us a bond item, which is like a rainbow potion but only for 1 stat, with the exact bond type depending on the pair of units in question. I deployed Ryan a lot in the early game to grab the defense bond item from his talk with Chris, but I never ended up specifically needing a bond over the rainbow potion for AI manipulation. Matria is the only unit from the south who can fly up to reach the north, and she will end up baiting over Mathis' crew. They have a linked AI to only charge when at least 2 of them are provoked. Mathis himself has a javelin, which helps us safely bait him up. On turn 13, Marth recruits Julian, our first thief. Thieves can open doors and grab treasure chests. Their combat is irrelevant to this run. Julian does also bring us a Men's Staff, which is an upgrade to heal Lind can use to accumulate EXP faster, and I think Militia uses it a couple of times as well. Julian recruits Mathis by talking to him, and he will also recruit a couple of other units later in the run. The rest of the map will just be walking Marth to the throne, grabbing some EXP with Palla and Katria, and ensuring Militia and Lind get their heals in. The boss of this map drops the Taurus Shard, which gives +1 to strength and defense, and unlike the Rainbow Potion or Bonds, it can actually pierce stat caps. Collecting all 12 of these shards is necessary for the good ending of the game, which we are going for. That'll be chapter 3 in 17 turns, the longest clear of the run by far. Free X is our first guidance chapter. When LTCing, the guidance chapter requirements are essentially free. Guidance chapters like the prologue were not present in FE3 Book 2, and they tend to feel very different from the other maps and follow the assassin subplot. They also act as a vehicle to add more units to the game who weren't in FE3 Book 2, and usually are tiny or have low deployment limits. This one is in the larger end and is once more a siege map. Riss joins in the middle of the map and is being chased by some enemies who we want to distract from him. The enemies are quite low leveled, so we benched Chris since he wouldn't grow much here. This is the final map before movement staves show up in the run. We deploy both Militia and Lind and make sure to get them a staff use on every single turn. We will position our units on turn 1 to keep our squishy staffers out of range of the archers. Natria rushes forward, since she's going to be the unit who will distract the archer chasing Riss on turn 2. At the start of turn 2 enemy phase, the boss simply leaves the map. There's no way to reach her in time even with a Draco Knight in normal play. The only exception is if you were using the online shop, which is a service that is no longer functional. The online shop existed in Shadow Dragon as well, and in both games there is a selection of weapons that it sells, changing up the exact ones from day to day. In Shadow Dragon, the only item of possible LTC consequence sold there would be a Master Seal, but in FE12, the online shop sells up to 3 rescue and 3 against saves, which would significantly impact the route, making for a very different LTC. On turn 3, Katria follows up by baiting away the Knight, saving risk from the units chasing him. Militia hits B staves there, meaning she can use the against staff once it shows up, though that's still many chapters away. Riss isn't quite out of the woods yet, since on turn 4 a couple of Knight reinforcements show up from the forts on the map, so Katria needs to block him off to protect him. Militia and Lind are the only magicians we really need to train. We do need more C-rank staff users to use the warp staff, but we actually will get 3 of them for free later, and a couple of units who can easily reach C staves if needed, which is why Riss is irrelevant to the run. We'll just clean up, and that'll be chapter 3x in 6 turns. At the end of the map, we get the option to go bald. Chapter 4 is the first turning point of the run since it's when the rescue staff shows up. In FE3 Book 2, it was a PRF locked to Yumina, but in this game it's an E-rank staff, so anybody can use it. Additionally, unlike in FE3 Book 2, movement staves can be repaired with the Hammerne staff, which means there are more uses to go around. The rescue staff does start in Yumina's inventory, and the first use of rescue is fairly straightforward, pulling Marth up near the North Village. Yumina's starting spot makes her important on this map, and she also has C staves, so much later in the run she will return to be a warper. Yubela the Mage has terrible base stats, and all he does in this run is move a bunch of items over a square out of the convoy. Marth visits the village to recruit Castor. Castor exists. Ogma is back from the prologue, and he recruits Sirius the Paladin, and will recruit another unit on the next map. Sirius is the professional flunky unit in this run. We need a spare promoted unit in some clears, in particular to bait some enemies by being not as good as our 100% growth units, and Sirius is the man for the job, with a notably low base luck stat to help with bait setups. In higher difficulties, he would be a true EXP target, since he has to be trained for a character recruitment in endgame, but we don't need to train him that hard. Here, we give Ogma the Taurus Shard and the Rainbow Potion to make Sirius a more tempting target. Our other units near the starting area focus on farming EXP and staff uses. Chris will be the boss killer, and he will fly across the mountains to reach the sea spine. Sirius moves down to farm some more EXP and takes the Rainbow Potion to reach the kill threshold with the Javelin and the Pirate. Humana also moves down to rescue Marth again. This use of rescue saves 2 turns, which is a deal which is still always worth taking. We intentionally rig some misses here in order to maximize EXP and to help get units damaged. Sirius gets his first level up. His most pressing stat benchmark is to reach level 4 by chapter 7. On turn 3, we'll just clean up. Chris will kill the boss, and Marth will cease to complete chapter 4 in 3 turns with 2 rescue uses. Chapter 5, in contrast, is a bit longer, though obviously not in the same league as Chapter 3. We unlock access to the Drill Grounds, a preps menu arena where you pay to generate a battle. We will use it to supplement our unit's EXP gain for a few chapters. Level ups in the Drill Grounds give you a static number of stat ups, possibly varying by up to 1, based on the sum total of a character's growth rates. As such, they won't be perfect, and so we will avoid gaining them. Cedar rejoined us at the end of the previous map, and she will charm 3 units for us later in the run. Chapter 5 has a lot of things we need to get done in the time we're here. Marth needs to visit the village in the top left to grab the Hammerne stuff. There are 2 recruitable units near the starting area, a few droppables, and a secret shop and a vendor we want to visit. You can see that the drill grounds gets expensive for units with high stats all around. The rescue tile priority in this game prefers the shortest distance from the rescue staffer, breaking ties in general as down is preferred over right, preferred over left, or preferred over up, so we occasionally resort to blocking off tiles to manipulate the rescue staff destination, such as here. On Maniac mode, Julian starting in the best spot can recruit Rickard on turn 1, simplifying the later turns of the clear. On higher difficulties, Rickard starts an extra square away from our starting position, so we need to resort to a more complicated strategy to pen him in to make sure that Julian can actually get to him. Ogma can walk up to recruit Barst immediately. Rickard is just a second thief with worse base stats that we will deploy on a couple of occasions where we want to open chests in different places, while Barst exists. That use of the rescue staff saved 2 turns, making it well worth it. Rickard brought with him the VIP card, which lets us visit secret shops. Sirius and Chris move up to shield Julian from the enemy mages. Up north, we can see George's snipers. On Maniac mode, they do not move until they've been attacked, but on higher difficulties, they will move to attack any units in range, complicating this clear significantly. Additionally, since on higher difficulties, the Hammerne staff is used exclusively on the rescue staff, you can save an extra turn on this map by rescuing a 6-move rescue user, such as a reclassed Aran on turn 1, and having that unit rescue Marth on turn 2. That strategy unavoidably provokes George's snipers, and since you want to rescue Marth back to seize after he visits the Hammerne village, the entire clear is stretched thin, with just enough units to box George in safely, and also pull off a massive trade chain to allow Militia to Hammerne the rescue staff before it gets used for a 5th time. Once we're done with the initial onslaught of enemies, our main crew have little to do save setting up staff targets. Katria will head to the boss area to mop up the kills there, and she is carrying the VIP card to visit the secret shop. Luke and Sirius take a sniper kill each while setting up a box around George. George is of course a future recruitable, so we don't want to kill him off here. Chris flies out to deal with the Draco Knights over the mountains. Chris's biggest stat benchmark is wanting to cap his defense stat as a Draco Knight by chapter 12. He can make do with less defense, but it streamlines the strategy there if his defense has been capped. The boss is a ballista and he has a similar lackey, and they help create staff targets for Lind. The boss has the Gemini shard, which grants +1 to strength and magic. We were careful to not leave enemies at low HP on enemy phase, since that would have caused that bishop to start burning up uses of the droppable physics staff. Since moving there causes the enemies on the left to start charging at him, moving them into position for Katria to face on the next turn. On turn 6, Marth visits the village to grab the important Hammerne. This staff has locked a militia for most of the campaign. Lena can also use it, but she joins on the literal last turn of the run. As previously mentioned, on higher difficulties, all the uses of Hammerne logically have to go to the rescue staff, but on Maniac mode the question is a little more subtle since there's also an infinite range warp staff that shows up in chapter 14. In the final turn, we have Chris buy a door key for the sake of the next map, and Katria visits the secret shop to buy the Master Seal. This is the third Master Seal we've obtained, and we need all three of them for Chapter 7. Lind rescues Marth to complete Chapter 5 in 7 turns. Chapter 6 sends us indoors to conclude the first story arc of this game, and we also have a lot of side objectives to grab, which is why we will actually deploy both of our thieves. This map features the first of Sida's 3 character recruitments. First move on the map is to Hammerne the rescue staff, giving us 4 more uses, which may surprise those unfamiliar with other LTCs of this game. The reason for this is that the warp staff shows up so late that almost every map afterwards is turn followed by character recruitments or eventing, so the extra value of 6 warp uses is at best a couple of turns, whereas 4 extra rescue uses are worth about 8 turns, due to the abundance of high value turn saves in the early game. As such, achieving the lowest overall turn count requires using Hammerne on rescue at least once. The innate rescue tile priority usually works against us since we typically want to move up or left, but here, since the shortest path to the throne involves going through the right side, it's easy to rescue Marth forward, saving 2 turns. The left path consists of a bunch of EXP bags, which Luke will farm. Sita, as previously mentioned, is here to recruit Samto, while Chris and Sirius will be the units accompanying Marth to the throne room area. The reason we bought the door key in the previous chapter was to open this door here. We could theoretically have convoy warped the one Luke grabbed on turn 1, but we want to use that key on the left door. Opening either door reveals the top chamber of the map, and near the left door is Samto. On higher difficulty, Samto charges towards us as soon as the right door is open, removing the need to go through the left, but here he stays put. There, Sita would be the one opening the right door, and she would be able to reach him on the final turn. Sita starts moving towards the left so she can reach Samto in time, though with this strategy she does need another unit to open the door for her. At the start of turn 3, Frey and Norn join. They both exist. On this turn we enter the throne room. Now that we have the physics staff, ensuring we get staff uses in on every turn is much easier. It is also worth a good amount of EXP. On higher difficulties, we would see a bunch of enemies reinforcing behind Frey and Norn on this turn. Final turn, we clean up everywhere. The boss drops the Cancer Shard, which grants +2 defense. Santo exists and brings us the Aquarius Shard, which grants +1 magic and +1 resistance. And Rickard retrieves the Libra Shard, which grants +2 luck. That'll be chapter 6 in 4 turns. After the last few large maps, we get a Guidance chapter that's just tiny. We once again have very limited deployment slots and low-leveled enemies. It is trivial for Marth to walk to the Seas Point, especially since he can walk on river tiles, though he can't quite get there on turn 1 himself. On higher difficulties, you would save a turn here by spending a use of the rescue staff to get him closer to the Seas Point. We were joined by Wendell at the end of the previous chapter. Wendell comes with D staves as a sage, meaning with 8 staff uses he can hit C staves as a bishop, letting him use the warp staff in exactly one late game map where we need a lot of warp users. Though it turns out this use of warp was not strictly necessary, it would just have required changing one thing in chapter 10, which I'll talk about when it comes up. The primary consideration here is keeping the 2 recruitable enemies, Caesar and Rad, alive. Both of them exist and are aggressive here, so we set up our turn 1 formation to expose Lind and Militia to keep them away from our buff 100% growth combat stars. We just need them to survive until the end of the map for them to join us. In turn 2, we'll just clean up to wrap up chapter 6x in 2 turns. Lind will hit level 12, which is as far as she'll go as an unpromoted unit, and she reaches C staves, which means she can now also use Physic and Warp. FE12's various difficulties have quite a few differences between them, and one of the most dramatic ones shows up on this map. LTCer XS discovered a brilliant strategy for this map that works on Maniac mode and higher difficulties, but not on the lower ones, and I came up with some minor improvements to grab all the droppable treasure. We used the 2 Master Seals we obtained in Chapter 5 on Luke and Lind. We need a couple of competent Draco Knights, a competent promoted staff user, a bait Draco Knight, and a competent Pegasus Knight for this strategy. In particular, the Bait Draco Knight needs to be a more preferred target for certain enemies than the Pegasus Knight and the Staff User, though all of the units need a certain level of competence since they need to hit a certain speed threshold in order to avoid being doubled by some powerful enemies. We also want to deploy some cavalry who meet certain minimum stat benchmarks. And one unit who can visit a cave. In the bottom left, there is a cave where a fire dragon resides. The dragon drops a firestone and the cave has a physic, both of which we want to grab. As such, we place Katria, who's reclassed to a Myrmidon to be able to enter the cave, and Marth within the activation range of the dragon, while also staying as far as they can from Astrum's heroes to the north. On the other hand, Sirius, our Bait Draco, flies right up to enter the range of one of them. On Maniac mode and higher, Astrum's heroes start moving as soon as you enter the range of any of them, and we need their support for this strategy. In the top right, we get two new units, Navarre and Fina. Navarre on this map has a great starting spot, and he will use it to grab a couple of droppable items from the thieves near him, and later help with the key maneuver on this map. He won't matter afterwards, but this is still more than a lot of units do in this LTC. Fina, on the other hand, is a dancer, and will of course be very important to this run. She needs to dodge a lot of attacks in this clear, but thankfully she generally will be on forests. The only notable stat check Fina will face is having a certain amount of bulk to tank a specific attack late in the game. Navarre's positioning there is careful to stay as far from Astrum's crew as he can. Since Lind hits C-Stave, she can use Physic as a Sage, and in general she will monopolize the Physic uses for most of the rest of the run as the primary Sage. Ryan Wendell and a reclassed Militia serve as the cavalry, while Pala will be the competent Pegasus Knight. The thieves who have treasure will attempt to escape at the top of the map, while the ones who don't are aggressive. For our strategy to work, we wanted Astrum's heroes to split up the way they did here. Luke flies to that spot to kill the thief carrying the Scorpio shard, which grants +2 speed. It is the only shard that grants speed, which will make it relevant for hitting certain benchmarks. Fina's turn 2 dance goes to Chris, who eliminates a dangerously accurate thief, and he will then fly up to the boss area. He can grab the Angelic Robe by killing that thief, and sits at 2 range of the boss, who has a 11 sword and can hence die on enemy phase. Now comes perhaps the biggest AI minip of the run. Sirius moves over to that specific spot. We roll the 2 heroes north of him up on skill, and as a result, they will see 2% crit on level 4 Sirius with the Rainbow Potion, causing them to definitively prioritize him over the slightly weaker Pala. I did have him unequip his lance to ensure the sword hero doesn't back off of him. Next, Pala flies up to the exact spot next to him and also unequips her lance to avoid scaring off sword heroes from the left. We want Pala to have more apparent bulk than Sirius, but less bulk than Lind, to ensure that Astrum's heroes will move how we want them to. And we of course wanted Lind, Pala, and Sirius to be fast enough that they would not get doubled by Astrum's heroes. Navarre moves down and to the left. Chris crit kills the boss on enemy phase to grab the Levin Sword, and he convoy warps it to Marth for later. With all of the respective AI manips in place, Astrum's heroes farm up in that exact formation for our play on turn 3. On turn 3, Luke, Navarre, and our cavalry all approach Astrum's crew to create a dense formation for Lind to walk into. And from the block hole, she will rescue Marth 3 tiles up, though it's really 5 tiles once you factor in terrain. All 13 of those squares had to be blocked off, necessitating Astrum's crew's involvement, which is also why the strategy cannot be executed on lower difficulties where they're less aggressive. This use of rescue saves 2 whole turns. After this, it'll just be cleanup. Since Pala and Sirius did not have to move to participate in the rescue boost, they're free to take actions. Pala can get us the small bullion, while Sirius can just barely reach the second Master Seal Thief. Chris will pick off the Wodao Thief, and Marth gets a chance to sneak in a kill on a hunter thanks to the Levin Sword. And Fina will then dance him to finish chapter 7 in 3 turns with all the treasure. At the end of the map, Wendell offers us a hat, which we will gladly accept. Chapter 8 is a lot more straightforward of a map, though we still have a lot of side objectives to grab. We have 3 recruitable units and several droppable items, plus lots of EXP to farm. The boss of this map is George, and we could recruit him by having Garden talk to him. In FE3 Book 2, this requires training and promoting Garden for the fastest clear, but since we have access to reclassing, we can just reclass him to Cavalier and avoid wasting EXP. Sita will also show up here to recruit Roger, and we want Marth to visit a village to grab Bantu. Despite everything that's going on, this map is surprisingly relaxed, so we deploy Wendell to grind up his staff rank. Fina is quite free here, so she'll help accelerate his timeline to minimize the number of times he needs to be deployed overall, though as previously mentioned, you can sidestep Wendell entirely with a minor tweak. We're also rejoined by Kane. He'll bait Astrum once later in this chapter, but that's all he'll do. We had Luke use the one-use Iron Lance in order to get damage to give Wendell a staff target and to set up the kill on that thief for Pala. There are quite a few promoted enemies on this map, also known as Big EXP Bags. Chris flies up to farm Harden's lackeys. Harden is an invincible super boss at this point, so there's no reason to provoke him. With the Rainbow Potion and the Scorpio Shard, Kane avoids being doubled by Astrum. Katria will fly down to kill the Leo Shard thief. The Leo Shard grants +2 strength. This just put her in range of a couple of Astrum's heroes, causing that entire squad to become aggressive. On higher difficulties, you can save a turn on this map by spending a rescue use to get Marth to visit the village a turn earlier. Roger attacks Pala, blocking up the spot where enemies can attack her from one range, causing them to go for Luke, who has more uncapped stats. Bandu joins us. He exists. Sita talks Roger over to our side, and since he got damaged, he can be a staff target for Militia. We retreat our units away from Astrum's crew, though Kane waits in a specific spot where he can distract just Astrum, allowing us to combat rig crits on everybody else. This works because Astrum moved in such a way that his reach is a lot further than any of his buddies when we place Katria in a very specific spot. Placing Luke there baited over the sniper such that Pala could stand on that exact spot while killing him. She hits level 18, which is as far as she will go unpromoted since the supply of Master Seals has started to open up. Wendell gotten a total of 5 staff uses on this map. Pala's position and the river let Linda rescue Marks to the left to reach the throne. Garden needs a couple of squares to reach George, so Fina's turn 3 dance goes to him. George comes with the Sagittarius shard, which grants +2 skill. Militia hits level 10 right on time to simplify next chapter a bit. That'll be chapter 8 in 3 turns. See you next time!